this next section, we're going to go through and solve. There are 4 different methods for solving: factoring, square roots, completing the square, and quadratic formula. Sometimes you'll be able to choose the best method, sometimes you'll be asked to do a specific method. So for the first one, it's asking me to factor. So all that's different from the last section is it's set equal to 0. You want to make sure it's set to 0. This is not a tricky try. This has an a value that's equal to 1, so it's easier. Numbers that multiply to 6 and add to 5 are 3 and 2. So I have x plus 3, x plus 2. The only thing that's different, set equal to 0. So you're setting each piece to 0. X plus 3 equals 0. X plus 2 equals 0. And your two answers are x equals negative 3 and x equals negative 2. For square roots, in this case, since the x is in the parentheses and it's x minus 2 quantity squared, and you don't have both an x squared and next to the first, you can go through and first isolate this. So to do that, I'm going to divide both sides by 3. I have x minus 2 quantity squared equals 12. Take the square root of both sides. Remember, when you're taking the square root, you need to remember plus or minus. So I have x minus 2 equals plus or minus square root of 12 is 2 root 3. The last thing you're doing is adding over that 2, so your final answer is x equals 2 plus or minus 2 root 3. You can also use a method that's called completing the square. So what you're doing here is you want to move the 1 to the other side. You want to have only terms with an x on the left-hand side. So step 1 is to add 1 to both sides. Then what I'm going to do is I'm looking at my b value, which is right here. You are taking half of that. I'm going to do the work off to the side, even though I could do it in my head. That gives you negative 2. I'm going to put a square around it and square it. You are creating a perfect square trinomial. You are going to add 4 to both sides to keep the equation balanced. That 4 goes here, and that 4 goes here. What you've done, this right here, is a perfect square trinomial. It factors into x minus 2 quantity squared. This is not a coincidence. This negative 2 here and this one here. It will always work out that way. On the other side, combine your 6 and 4. And then it turns into the square root method. Square root, x minus 2. Don't forget your plus or minus. 10 cannot be broken down. Add the 2 over. And there's your final answer. And the last method, the quadratic formula. If you are not already singing the song in your head, I did post that as well because the quadratic formula is something that does need to be memorized. So here it is. I am not going to sing it because my voice is terrible. Copy that down, commit it to memory. You want to make sure your equation is set to 0. In my case, it is. Here's your a value. Your b value would be 1. And your c value is negative 5. Plugging in, I have x equals negative 1 plus or minus b squared. So 1 squared is 1 minus 4. Putting in my 2 for a and my negative 5 for c. All over 2 times 2 or 4. Simplify. Negative 1 plus or minus. This gives you 1 Minus 4 times 2 times negative 5 will turn into positive 40. So 1 plus 40, or 41, over 4. That cannot be simplified. If you could simplify the square root, you would do that first.